Max Atkinson spends his life studying videotapes of top politicians talking.
There is only one banner that Britain flies. The one it's kept flying for centuries. The red, white and blue.
After analysing hundreds of speeches, Dr. Atkinson has discovered the hidden rules of the word games played by politicians to make us applaud. Anne Brennan has never made a political speech in her life, and she's worried. A housewife who's only just got involved in politics, she will soon have to stand up and address a party conference.
I'm absolutely petrified of standing in front of this audience, but if someone is prepared to show me and teach me how to do it, then I'll be highly delighted to go along and have a go at it.
World in Action challenged Dr. Atkinson to put his theories to the test, to reveal the tricks of the speaker's trade and transform Anne Brennan into an orator.
There is only one banner that Britain flies.
Voices have been raised protesting.
And some local authorities control whether £1 million.
Anne lives in North London. Married to a taxi driver, she works part-time in an estate agent's. Recently, and reluctantly, she got involved in local politics.
Basically, I never thought politics had much to do with me, really. It was only sort of over the last few years where I thought, well, I'm not too happy. And if I feel like this, I felt the best thing for me to do, really, was to try to become involved. So I looked around and I thought, well, the SDP seems to be more the party for me. But having said that, I found that they were really middle-class intellectual people, terribly nice, but really didn't relate to your everyday, ordinary working-class person. They really didn't know the difficulties of perhaps living on a council estate, as I've done all my life. And I thought really to try to help them and to help the people who live on these estates, perhaps it's better if someone like me spoke to them. I suppose what you get a lot of sort of kids and people like that, do you?
Oh, well, I mean, even if the police was to chase anybody, Pennville Road, they run right up the staircase through here, right the way round. There's so many.
Yeah. Is it just children, or like, you know, do you get problems with sort of winos or anything like that?
The winos, as I said, the prostitutes, you get children running here, especially over dinner time.
I find it quite easy to talk to people face to face, person to person. But what I've got to do when I get to Buxton is carry this argument into the hall. And the thought of standing up in front of 400 to 500 people scares the living daylights out of me. But I feel I'm determined enough, perhaps, to get up there and do it. And that's what I've got to do.
So you feel really full there. So
The first thing a professional speaker must master is voice control. Cecily Berry produces the best voices in Britain.
4, now open your mouth. 5, feel your throat's really free and open. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Walk quite swiftly.
Mrs. Thatcher had her voice deepened and her range improved by experts at the National Theatre. Anne went to get her voice coached with the Royal Shakespeare Company.
5, 6, 7, 8. Not bad. And open your mouth and then just sigh out. That's good. And jump. Hey!
Hey!
Good. And again. Ha. Ha.
Ha!
Right. And fill down and hey.
Hey!
And fill down and ho. Ho.
Ho!
That's it. Do you begin to feel a bit freer up there?
I do, yeah.
Good. It's like when people say take a deep breath and do it, you know, and it's absolutely like that. That's what we've got to do, is get this as relaxed as you can, because that will give you confidence.
Yeah.
And basically, it's all about confidence anyway, and feeling the right to be there and to speak.
In Oxford, scientists at Wolfson College study the subtleties of human speech and body language. Anne went there to meet the man who watches video to expose the devices used by the most effective public speakers, The results of Dr. Atkinson's studies are revealed today in his book, Our Master's Voices.
What you're actually saying in this book is that politicians use tricks to make people like me clap.
Yes, and more than that, in fact, there already is a word in the language which everybody knows for referring to it, which is claptrap. A lot of people think that means the sort of thing politicians say, but in fact, if you look it up in the Oxford Dictionary, you find that it means a trick, device, or language designed to catch applause. And when you look at the tapes, you find that there are various things that they're doing over and over again, which occur just before the audience start to applaud. Probably the most common is a thing we call contrast or antithesis, which is probably the most common or oldest trick in the book. It involves juxtaposing two opposites, and one of the most famous ones is to be or not to be, for example. Or man is born free and everywhere is in chains. Similarly, President Kennedy's inaugural speech, the best remembered quotation from that is, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." And these are, one finds used very regularly indeed. Martin Luther King, who was a completely natural and highly successful orator, always did much the same thing.
I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
So you see there, it says, "I may not get there with you," which sets up a kind of puzzle. And then he solves it in the second part, "but we as a people will get to the promised land." And it's very important, you'll notice in a lot of these sequences before applause, to use the word we, because that's the way in which you can say that you're speaking on behalf of the people that you're speaking to. And contrasts are also a very useful way of building insults aimed at your opponents. And in this next example, you'll see Michael Foot quoting from Zsa Gabor, and he's attacking David Owen with a very neat little contrast, which is also very amusing.
Men who try too hard to be macho are generally not macho, and that's
So in a way they go.
Are there any other type of claptraps?
One of the things we find is that a lot of bursts of applause occur immediately after a politician has said the third thing in a list of three. So I'll show an example here of Mrs. Thatcher, who is attacking the pessimists in the party, and you'll hear her saying that they underestimated three things, and the audience start to applaud after the third item.
The pessimists told us it couldn't be done. They underestimated three things: this government, you, Mr. President, and the British people.
I'll show you another one now, which is Tony Benn. And you see in this one, it's very interesting that he, in fact, times his gestures to coincide with each item in the list. And on the third item, you'll see his whole body lurching forward. And at that point, the audience start to applaud.
and they kill it secretly, privately, without debate.
I have here a famous example from George Wallace, the governor of Alabama, an early speech of his, inaugural speech, where you'll see that the audience come in immediately after the third item in the list.
I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
Do politicians do it deliberately?
Well, I think that the successful ones do it instinctively, probably, although it's not altogether clear. I recently spent some time talking to one of Gary Hart's speechwriters, and in fact I spent about 5 hours talking to her, and I showed her these things, and she did not seem to have any awareness of the fact that these things worked in the way that they appear to work, even though she was writing speeches which used them. Now here's a brilliantly successful device used by the Prime Minister, which we call set 'em up and knock 'em down. And you see what she does is she outlines the opposition's position, and then having done that, she states her position by saying it's a load of rubbish, and away they go.
Unspoken assumption behind policies of withdrawal from the community and unilateral disarmament is that others will continue to bear their burdens and pick up ours as well. That others would continue to accept our products even though we refuse to accept theirs, that others would ensure the defense of Europe and provide a shield behind which we could shelter. What a contemptible policy for Britain.
Now that device is 100% successful when Mrs. Thatcher uses it. And if you want to know more about how successful the various devices I've shown you are, I suggest you go and see my colleague John Heritage at Warwick University, because he's done a large-scale statistical study and can tell you exactly how successful they are.
Right, I'll do that. John, I've heard all about these three-point lists and contrasts from Max, but I mean, do you really think they're going to work for me?
You see, the interesting thing about these devices, Anne, is that some of them are very much more successful than others. For example, the contrast is 5 times more successful than the point made by an ordinary sentence. The three-part list is something like 3 or 4 times more successful than an ordinary sentence. And some of the devices, like the set 'em up and knock 'em down one you've just seen, that is as much as 12 times more successful than an ordinary sentence. So really, you can get results through the use of these devices if you pick the right device for the right context.
This three-point list, are you suggesting that they'll applaud just because I've said things in 3?
Well, I think the evidence here is mixed, really. The three-part list is a bit like an Exocet missile. When it hits, it really hits very well. But the thing is, you have to deliver it properly. A lot of people have got this tendency to let their voice drop down and let their eyes drop to the next item on the speech that they're trying to make. And in the process, they break contact with the audience. Now, if you keep your voice up and if you keep your head up as you're delivering a three-part list and punch it out nicely, you're almost assured of success.
I mean, you've watched hundreds of these speeches. I mean, who is the most effective? Who should I be really modelling myself on?
Well, I think the first thing to say about this is that, on the whole, people who speak slowly and deliberately are very effective in getting applause and getting the message across generally. And I think of all the people who speak slowly and deliberately in making political speeches, one has to say that Margaret Thatcher is the outstanding success of modern times. One of her speeches as party leader, which I looked at, in the 45-minute speech which she gave, over 10 minutes of that time was occupied with applause. She was applauded 77 times in 35 minutes. And that's a tremendously effective rate. It's once every 4 sentences on average she was applauded. And so it's slowness, deliberation, leaving space between the sentences, and getting the message across through producing short, simple sentences is really the critical thing to do.
If the dull substance of my flesh were thought, injurious distance should not stop my way, for then, despite of space, I would be brought from limits far removed where thou dost stay. No matter then, although my foot did stand upon the farthest earth removed from thee, for nimble thought can jump both sea and land, as soon as think the place where he would be.
Can you be really ridiculous and bold and sing it, make up a tune and sing that like a piece of opera?
Are you sure?
Yeah. Just make up a tune, it doesn't matter. But just enjoy the sound of it so that the whole thing carries you. Okay.
If the dull substance of my flesh were thought, injurious distance should not stop my way, for then, despite of space, I would be brought from limits far removed where thou dost stay.
Right, now speak it to me, as though I'm a bloke that you're talking to. Right.
If the dull substance of my flesh were thought, injurious distance should not stop my way, for then, despite of space, I would be brought from limits far remote where thou dost stay.
That's better. Can you feel that?
But that so much of earth and water wrought, I must attend time's leisure with my moan.
That's smashing. Can you feel that? Yes.
Yeah, but I'm holding myself so that I'm keeping this deep, it feels.
You're holding down?
I seem to be.
Right. That's a little bit because we're doing it as an exercise. Do you see what I mean? For getting the voice down. But that's very necessary for the moment, so that you feel the weight of sound. Then when one has it with one's own language, which you are behind and you know what the thought is, then you start to be free. You see? Just do that second bit again, but just allow the thoughts now to spring a bit. For nimble thought
For nimble thought can jump both sea and land, as soon as think the place where he would be.
To give her experience of professionals performing live, Dr. Atkinson took Anne to her first political congress, the TUC, where Arthur Scargill was persuading delegates to support the miners.
No profit is safe from this butcher of British industry. This chairman of British Steel, he butchered over 100,000 jobs. He talks about investment policy, and he talks about industry. He talks about the company and the business. He never talks about human beings whose greatest investment is their life. I heard references to violence. Yes, Mr. President, we've had violence. Is it not an act of violence to threaten to destroy the job of a man, his son or his daughter? That's an act of violence that should be condemned. He never talks about human beings whose greatest investment is their very lives.
Backstage, Dr. Atkinson reran the highlights of Arthur Scargill's speech and analysed them for Anne.
She did manage to get one or two good heads of steam, which no doubt come over and partly explain why he is so charismatic. In this particular sequence, you'll see that he sets up or identifies Ian McGregor as the arch enemy.
Yeah.
Having done that, he says that he does three things wrong. Having said those three things, he moves into a contrast with those three things. And as he moves into this punchline, the contrastive punchline, you'll see his body moving up and down and the gestures start. He raises his voice. And the audience is left in no doubt that they should start applauding as soon as this punchline comes.
I warned Congress last year that they could not accept the balance sheet mentality of someone like Ian McGregor. He talks about investment policy, and he talks about industry. He talks about the company and the business. He never talks about human beings whose greatest investment is their very lives in industry. And that is what...
Max, I've seen a lot of these devices, and you know I'm going to Buxton to my conference, and when I get there I want to talk about inequality and the image of the SDP. How best can I use these devices?
Well, I think at this stage, probably the best thing to do would be to go and see a professional speechwriter. Somebody like Joe Haynes, who used to write speeches for Harold Wilson, and now writes editorials for the Daily Mirror.
What I'd like to do, Joe, is I'd like to... I mean, you know what our image is. Middle-class intellectuals. Well, I think if this party's going to succeed, then it's got to broaden its appeal. It needs to be able to relate to people like me, working-class people, and encourage us to join the party or indeed vote for them, which is most important.
I think that the three-part list and the contrast and my own preference for modest alliteration can come in here. So instead of really talking about claret, what I would like to see you do here is to say that as a party we should be more concerned with Bermondsey than with Burgundy. That gives you the contrast and the alliteration. That council houses are more important than country houses. Done it again. And that comprehensives are more important than colleges. That would give you a three-part list, which not only this research, but my whole experience has shown me is the most effective way of delivering a speech or an article. It will give you a three-part list, it will state the contrast, and it gives you the alliteration, which is good for effect. I mean, every party is in politics to get power. What you have to tell them is that no middle-class party in history has ever won an election on the votes of the middle class. And in front of you is going to be a whole sea of Guardian readers. Those are the people, the kind of people that are associated with the SDP. Right. So tell them, quite simply, but it will be a vivid illustration, tell them that if everybody who reads The Guardian, but only them, voted SDP at the next election, you would lose your deposit in every constituency in the country. The point that you want to make is that the The SDP needs the working class vote more than the working class vote at the minute needs the SDP.
Absolutely.
That's what you want to say. That's the point that you've got to put over.
Yeah, that's very good.
Make that point, and they will grasp it, even if it shocks them slightly.
On a wet Wednesday morning in Buxton, after days of solid talk, the delegates were weary and none too keen to clap. The debate on inequality at the SDP Assembly was based on a complex paper on how to update utilitarian philosophy.
For today's Labour Party, while it has the will to fight poverty, it is hamstrung by the flat earthist views it has from its past and the fact it fails to recognise the ability of the market to create wealth to combat poverty.
Inequality is a problem to which all governments have paid lip service, but in practice have done little or nothing to cure.
The thought of standing up in front of 400 to 500 people scares the living daylights out of me, but I feel I'm determined enough perhaps to get up there and do it, and that's what I've got to do.
With the help of Cicely Berry and Dr. Atkinson, Anne rewrote the start of her speech to match the mood of conference. Now, all she had to do was deliver.
Anne Brennan, Barnesbury SDP. Madam President, I feel very unequal in this debate. I've been through the background paper, and I hardly understand a word of it. Imagine knocking on people's doors in King's Cross and preaching the word with this. They'd end up wishing you were a Jehovah's Witness. "95% of you have had a higher education. I haven't even got an O-level. And whether you know it or not, you're using the privilege of your education to conduct the kind of debate in which most working class people would be scared to open their mouths. Now, whether we like it or not, tomorrow's voters are being educated in comprehensive schools, not cloistered colleges. Council houses are more common to the British people than country houses. We must never forget, Bermondsey is more important to the SDP than Burgundy. I'll come clean, Madam President. And I hope it's not grounds for expulsion. I don't even read The Guardian. And since coming to Buxton, I've never seen as many people reading The Guardian in the whole of my life. Now, the point is, even if everybody who reads The Guardian votes for us, and only them, we'll lose our deposit in every constituency in the country. Never forget, no middle-class party ever won an election on the votes of the middle classes alone. But let's...
You don't get extra time.
Can I not go?
One sentence.
I live in a council flat in Islington.
Whoa, one sentence.
Okay. I live in a council flat in Islington. Last year we had a by-election in our ward. Labour put up the Marxist son of the head of the CBI. We put up a local man, a taxi driver by trade, and the people poured out the council estates, voted for us, and we won another seat.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Well, how did you feel actually doing it?
I felt marvellous once I was up on the stage, but the point of getting up off the seat, I was rather nervous about that. But obviously I wasn't quite sure how the audience were going to react to me. Yes. I had no idea at all, and I was absolutely amazed when they started clapping and stomping. I couldn't believe that.
Well, you had 6 bursts of laughter and 10 rounds of applause. And that's why, yes, and that's good in any speech, let alone a 3-minute one.
That many?
Yes, and that's why you ran out of time.
Yeah,
they were clapping and laughing for about 1 minute and 20 seconds.
And I had so much more to say,
exactly.
really.
Yeah,
you
you
know.
only had 4 minutes to go.
Well, I'm just amazed, really, at the response. I never expected to get that sort of response. Truly, I never did.